Does your recoil on your Craftsman string trimmer do this? Where it's not engaging? Today we're going to sort this out. The first thing we have to do is remove the handle to get this cable so that this whole assembly is freed, because we're going to take it apart right here, and this shaft and head assembly has to come off from the power head assembly. To take this off, we need a T20 Torx bit. This splits the throttle assembly apart and this handle. Note, one of the screws was fine thread, and that keeps the handle from slipping around, sliding up and down. I relieved the spring pressure and pulled this off of the hinge pin, which was here, and then unthreaded the cable out of this lever. Next, I'm going to go for these 3 screws right here, which should pull this and that apart. Doing this frees the power head from the shaft assembly. Now that I have these apart, it's apparent this coupler shaft has to come off, and that looks like the crankshaft or the clutch shaft. And I looked in the end, I don't see any kind of a set screw, and it has a 6-sided spot here, so I'm going to assume this will unscrew. Looking at the parts diagram, this appears to be a nut, and that's a sleeve. So I'm going to get an impact driver, and this is 19 millimeters. I'll probably have to remove the spark plug, put some rope down in the cylinder, turn this until the rope is jamming the piston, and then back this off with the impact wrench. With the spark plug. Spark plug's pretty clean. This is one of those easy start spark plugs from Champion. Now that I have the spark plug out, I'm turning the crankshaft via this nut, and watch the piston go down. Okay, now it's coming back up. So I want to get it to its lowest point, and then feed in some rope. So I fed a bunch of rope in. Now I'm turning the shaft, and it's stopped because in there that rope is all compressed. And the rope I'm using is a recoil rope. So the plan was to use this deep socket, which is a 19 millimeter, but the diameter of this shaft is bigger than the hole on the inside. So when I get down so far, it won't go down all the way. So we're going to the 19 millimeter end wrench. I can't hold this with one hand and turn it at the same time. It's pretty stiff, but it is turning. So let me get it off of here and I'll show you. Okay, it's free enough now that it's unscrewing. Okay. Now, come back with the Torx and remove this screw right here, and there's another one down here. And that'll take this whole starter housing off, and according to the parts diagram, it's a whole assembled unit with no listed separate parts. So we're going to find out what's inside this little beast. In addition to the 3 screws from the front side, there's one on the back side, and we also have the 2 on the bottom side that hold in the fuel tank. So I'm going to take all those out. Once those extra 3 screws were out, this slides off. You pull the gas tank, which has fingers that attach in here through screws from the bottom. But now I need to take needle nose pliers in there and pull the wires off the kill switch. Okay, the wires are free, and now this unit is free to pull off the shaft. But looking inside my starter recoil thing, it looks like it came apart. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to repair this or not. So the parts all fit back in okay, but it appears this starter recoil unit was dragging on these pins. I don't know if you can see how chewed up it is here. And I was trying to figure out what holds it on, and this particular retainer was up against the flywheel fan. Well, that thing is just pressed on there. So I don't know if I can trust putting it back on or not. I cleaned all the plastic that had been ground from this thing running, and there's all the shreds. And trying it, I mean, the recoil seems to be working, and the teeth are clear, so they can engage the fingers. So now what I'm going to do is do a little hammer action on this retainer, flatten it out a little more to make sure that it bites onto this tube. I gently tapped on this to flatten it out a little bit more so those ears will bite into that plastic tube. It's going to be stiff to get on, which is good. That way this piece won't come off. But I can't do it with one hand. It just worked out that the spark plug socket was perfect size to drive that tube on. I just set it on here and tapped it with a hammer, drove it into position. So now I'm going to start the reassembly. Using a needle nose pliers, I pushed those 2 wire connectors onto the kill switch, but I had to slide it onto the shaft, as you can see down here, just a little bit for these wires to reach because they're pretty short. You have to align the 2 tabs on the gas tank into this red housing. As you're pushing this together, the red housing will stop because the starter teeth on the flywheel cooling fan are hitting the plastic. So you have to pull the recoil rope a little bit and it'll drop down another 1/2 inch into position. Now I can start putting the screws in. This screw had a blunt tip and it was a sheet metal style screw. These 3 screws were a machine thread. There's 3 of them. The 2 fuel tank screws that go in here and here, they were a pointy tip sheet metal style screw. All 6 of those screws were tight. Next step is to screw on this coupler extension or whatever part they want to call it. And again, I'm going to have to use 2 hands, tighten it with this 19mm. The rope is still in the cylinder to allow us to have resistance to turn this. 2 hands. And I pull the rope out of the cylinder. I tighten this with the rope in the cylinder to keep the piston from moving so I could tighten it. Now we're going to see if the recoil works. Before we go any further, I don't know if you can see it turn. It's hard to do one hand. It's turning. You can hear it clicking. In goes the spark plug. Spark plug is in and torqued. I can't do this one-handed. Okay, so I have this set in a vise, and had it clamped high enough and tight enough that it would hold it up. Then I slid the motor in, but it wouldn't go in all the way until I pulled the recoil rope, which engaged the square drive shaft into that extension piece. Now I can put these 3 screws in. Okay, all 3 of those are tight. Now all that remains is to put the grab handle back on. I have to put the lever on this little cable end assembly. Hard to do with one hand. Then this fits over this hinge pin. The end of the spring fits in that triangular shaped opening. When you've got it all reassembled, it would look something like this. Now I have to use my other hand and put that piece on and then start putting the screws back in it. You have to roll it a little bit to be able to get those pieces to align and get the cable to come out the slot in between the 2 grab handle halves. The screw that goes in this hole is a machine screw, and it screws into the tube to keep the handle from rotating. So you saw I was pulling the recoil rope, but I was trying to do it with one hand and hold it with my elbow. But it's turning and it's all done. Thanks for watching.